everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. So great to see you. Hope you had a good week. Today is Friday once again. We have a new moon coming up. Jeff's going to go into that, and certainly he's going to go into our current events. And then our brief topic for today is our past lives and astrology and how that ties into our destiny. So interesting. Also, I just wanted to mention that if you notice, I'm wearing something different. On last week's show, we talked about Anastasia and we talked about the ringing cedars. After the show, Jeff remembered that he purchased some of the cedar. Now, we're not 100% sure it's from the ringing trees, but it's definitely from Siberian cedar. He had purchased some of these pieces. So I'm wearing one, Jeff's wearing one, and I can definitely feel a shift. I felt a shift about an hour after I put it on. So Jeff's going to go into that a little bit too. So take it away, Jeff.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, new moons, of course, happen every month. They're a great time to focus, meditate, set new goals and all that. And, definitely you can feel the energy. It's actually happening Pacific Coast time at right about 8:54 a.m. In the tropical zodiac, it's going to be right at about 25 degrees or 28 degrees, 25 minutes. But in the sidereal Vedic astrology, it's 24 degrees back at 4 degrees of Taurus, 17 minutes in a lunar mansion called Kritika, which is good because Kritika has a real solidity of actions. In other words, when it happens in that nakshatra or lunar mansion, it tends to really solidify things. So this is a good month to really focus on what you want to accomplish. It'll take root. So it's good. It's good for planting too. So like that.
Yeah. I've got a lot of seeds to plant, actually. Going to get that going this month.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And what's interesting too is, in a lot of the news that we've been hearing, I'm hearing more rumblings about this digital currency. There was also a railroad car that was full of ammonium nitrate, which is used for explosive, which mysteriously missed. It showed up empty in the Mojave Desert. It left Cheyenne, Wyoming. And, this, again, I looked into that and went, okay, did that really just leak out like they said along the tracks? Or did something happen where somebody got their hands on that? Because, again, I'm looking at the terrorist activities that are likely to come through. Something is going to come through this fall with the United States Mars on the moon. The owners want chaos. And we got an election year coming in, and I can tell you this is very, very powerful. So let's hope nothing like that happens. But, we know that a lot of these things are engineered that happen. So let's hope it doesn't.
Yeah, nowadays it feels like everything's being engineered, doesn't it?
I think it has been for a long time. Not that everything is, but
not everything.
Sure.
But a lot.
A lot has been engineered, you bet. And we always tend to find that there's some very mysterious circumstances surrounding a lot of these events that happen.
Yeah. And, what have you been hearing about cash and digital currency?
Well, that executive order that Biden signed they're really trying to get cash out of the world and go to digital currency. They'll have complete control of your life. And we talked about this before when we were in Franklin Canyon. I keep getting, it's going to get thwarted. Biden's executive order, I think it's 104 something -34 something, but forget the numbers. But the bottom line is he did sign an executive order that allows the Fed to start implementing digital currency. That means a retraction of all the cash that we have. And then, of course, turning, it into a little digital token that can be controlled, which could control anything you buy everywhere you go. They could turn it on, turn it off. And one of the things that if we look back, right after the Federal Reserve was signed in, the Federal Reserve Act in 1934, I believe it was, Roosevelt was extracting all the gold. He was literally suing and taking people, they're threatening them to put them in jail if they didn't, turn in their gold, and they did. And of course, that was the gold-backed bond thing. Now, of course, we can all gold again. And then Nixon took us off the gold standard, and I think it was 71. So the next big move would be this digital currency. Now, if the interrogation astrology is right, they're going to try it, and I think they're going to get there sooner or later, but not totally. I believe, again, thank God for the Constitution, that they're not going to be able to totally make us go 100% on digital currency. So I think cash is still going to be around for a while. And let's hope it is. As Thomas Jefferson rightly said, if anybody ever gets the power to print our money, they'll be more dangerous than any standing army. Well, this isn't printing. This is called literally controlling your money from a digital distance. You will not be able to buy something. So if the astrology is right, I keep getting it's not going to fully happen.
Good. We need to cast a chart sometime asking about investment and what's a good place for people to put their money, because things are really changing. And what always comes to me is, well, obviously real estate's good, but all real estate isn't good.
True.
Right? People think about silver, people think about gold. Gold's very expensive. Silver, is it going to move or not? Or should you just put your money there to hold it? Have your money held in silver. So It would be interesting to cast a chart and look at that at some time in the future.
Yeah. Well, that kind of stuff, how I respond to that is, first off, I can't give medical advice, nor can I give financial advice or tell anybody what to do. I just can't.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not licensed for that. But, because that's very heavily regulated by the SEC. However, I do have a lot of clients who ask me about certain investments. And of course, you can ask anything under the sun with interrogation astrology. And I have found it to be very, very accurate. And, you can ask, where's my cat, down to where's the missing money, to any other thing you want to ask. And I have found it to be really accurate. And I've actually worked with a lot of traders. The problem is you have free will. So it's very accurate when, like, for instance, in real estate, I get involved with this a lot, where people will say to me, well, I've looked at 3 houses. This one has this condition, that condition, this condition. Which one looks like the best from the interrogation? And I'll go through and show them, and invariably it's right. But you have so many other contingent factors, like, closing, did they put earnest money down? So it's a really reliable tool to go by. But, again, I can't give any financial advice, and I'm always cautious to tell people, go by what the astrology says, but in the end, it's your decision. But I have found it to be really accurate. We have had great success in real estate sales. Like, for instance, people selling property. I do what we call real estate elections. In other words, the time it's put on the market is the time you sign with a realtor. Also, the time you close or put the offer in. Whenever it becomes irrevocable, like I'm doing all the time, I'm doing retainer work for clients where they'll want times to file corporations. You can't control when the Secretary of State rubber stamps it and gives you the corporation, but you can certainly control the time you initiate the act. It's like diving off a diving board. You can control that. You may not control exactly how you hit the water, but, once you're in the air, you're in the air. So that's how astrology really is effective. It's called electional astrology and also interrogation astrology, both of which are really useful tools to guide you. And then I always say, check with your attorney, check with your financial advisor. And if all that checks out, go for it. Because I've worked with a lot of traders. I have one quick story I'll tell. A guy was a commodity trader. And if we all remember the movie Trading Places, remember the Orange Juice and Eddie Murphy and Ralph Bellamy and Dan Aykroyd. Anyways, long story short, this guy was going to make a move on commodities. And he said to me, he said, Jeff, what do you think? I says, I wouldn't do it. I said, it doesn't look good. Well, he gets back on the phone with his broker. Oh, no, this is a sure thing. Got to do it. He called me the next day and said, I'm selling beach houses, my Ferraris, everything else, because the chart was right. And he went flat broke. I mean, he lost his shirt. And the chart said it was not a good move to make. So again, you see what I mean? You get free will in here. And I see this all the time. Like, even my son was investing into a stock, and I told him, I said, stay in this thing. It looks great, and he did. Except he panicked and said, well, it's going to crash, and jumped out when he would have made a lot more had he stayed in longer. Mm-hmm. So this is always the emotional factor. And that's where free will comes in. So, the charts are very accurate. I've done a lot of crypto stuff where some things look good and some things look horrible, or they just weren't going anywhere. Right. So you got to really be careful. Right. That, the emotion of money, speaking of money, is, I think it was Rothschild that said it best. He says, you give me control of the money and I don't care who makes the laws, because everyone is emotional about money. We all need money, right? At least we think we do. So.
Right. Right. Well, speak to our topic for today, Jeff, about past lives and astrology and how that ties to our destiny.
Yeah, again, that's a really vast topic that we're not going to be able to ever come to completion on in a short podcast like this, but it's really fascinating because we all, a lot of people don't believe in past lives, and a lot of people do. I think more people do today than ever before. The religions, basically you could say the Christian religion, from the staunch Roman Catholic standpoint, it's been kind of abolished the whole idea of reincarnation. The doctrines of reincarnation were pretty much thrown out by the church somewhere between the 1st and the 5th century. These were the bearded men murdering each other to decide what Christians might get to believe for the next 1,500 years. And yet many other sects of Christianity do believe in it, Christian Science and many other sects. That's why we had all this division and breaking off from the staunch doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church. And yet it appears that they were definitely in the ancient religions. There's no question, especially the Christian religion. I always direct people to that book, The Magus of Strovolos, which I think is a true, real, accurate depiction of Christianity. In fact, the only book you'll probably ever read that actually has a true account of the crucifixion, where the Magus of Strovolos met him in a previous life. Astounding book, one of my favorites to recommend. But back to the topic, the Nadi astrology and almost every other culture in the world, including Judaism, all believes in reincarnation. And there's many different varied viewpoints on that. And no one, including myself, ever has a definitive viewpoint on this. But the general thing is that, yes, we keep reincarnating in this dimension, or you could say on Earth, until we purify and rectify the soul, or also may have had enough experience. And then we move on. And there seems to be something very deeply connected to the soul root that we're attached to, which has a lot to do with not only our ancestors and DNA train, but the people we marry, the people we love, the people we hate, the people we divorced, all this stuff. There's all kinds of a very complex amalgam of astrology that shows is happening to the reincarnation. And one of the most interesting things in Vedic astrology, or Nadi, is the Trim Samsa. Now, people might say, Trim what? That's what I said when I first heard it. It's a strange word that means the 30-degree divisional chart in the Nadi or Vedic astrology. And they take the ruler of the ascendant of that chart, and you can see what's going on in this life. And you can also see what you're doing in this life and the possible sufferings or blessings, because you get blessings too, in this life. So it's really a fascinating journey. And I've looked at, of course, as many people as I can in my family, myself, and I always look at clients. And you can see both in the birth chart and in the Trim Samsa, use them together in the Navamshas. These are all divisional charts. A very interesting pattern of certain energies that are tied in. Because I see it every day where people will talk about how this brother is so amazing to them, or it's just been total animosity. They fight and they hate each other. Or you see the relationships with the parents that are either amazing or horrible. And these things are very deep riddles that are embedded into the Nadi astrology. And of course, you can see it in the Western systems too, which have been clouded, particularly, I think, since the Chaldean and Egyptian days. And that was all really looked at as you came up through the medieval times. And then, of course, after about the late 1600s, which William Lilly is probably one of the later astrologers that people are familiar with, astrology really fell in the sewer. It became totally almost blacked out, and didn't resurface until the late 1800s with the spiritualist movements. And now today everyone knows their sun sign. And of course, that's tropical astrology. But reincarnation, I think, in Nadi and Vedic astrology has been unchangeable for as far back as I can see. And many of the modern scholars say, well, all the astrology came from the Greeks and the Egyptians over to India. I think it's exactly the other way around, in my opinion. I really believe that the Nadi and the Vedic astrology may certainly have been a parallel to the mother of astrology. It's very, very ancient, and it looks at the soul as its experience here is very blocked. And we've talked a lot about this, and that is the world of illusion that we live in. And for some reason, this little mark we all have right here seems to be indicative of knocking us out so we can't remember our past lives. And I always got kind of irritated at, well, why would God do that? Why would we be blocked from seeing our past lives? And, there was some good responses to that in the Shari Hagilgam and other ancient texts that said if we could see what was about us, all the spirits and the angels, because you got to remember these five senses we have, they're pretty limited. They look on the visual spectrum, the audible spectrum. Of course, we touch and we feel and we smell. But the bottom line is we can't see into the spiritual spectrums for the most part. If you get into astral travel and deep meditation, you can, but even then it's glimpses. So the interesting thing is we're put here in these bodies to dissipate out this karma, which, we're in time, and time, of course, is referred to in the ancient Nadi and Vedic scriptures as Kalapurusha, which is a word they also use called Maya, which is the illusion of this physical world. And this gets into past lives. It's almost like this truly is a matrix here, a quite divine and a quite complex one, where we drop into these bodies in the environments that we're in and our reality structures, which the lower conscious mind, also known as the nefesh, but we'll just stick with the lower conscious mind, is completely built up of all of our exposure to the environments and the people and our deductive reasoning as we grow older. And yet, many of us get more and more conscious as we go through lives. And that's the goal, is the more we realize the lower physical world with all the money and all the egos and all the possessions and all the physical needs is really not us, but we are a spiritual being having a physical experience, the more magical I think life becomes. Because we don't take nothing with us, and I always like to say that because we don't, and yet we all cling, with such fear to all these possessions. And the world right now is probably changing more rapidly than ever before with the technologies, and that's exactly what the astrology says. People are worried about freedoms, they're worried about all this AI technology, digital currency, wars, et cetera, et cetera. So it's nothing new, but it's just coming at us much faster with a whole different way. And it's interesting because this is also referred to in many of the ancient texts. The Rosicrucians were very interesting in this too, where they had said waves of souls come through here to purify. And of course, we look at our hours, our minutes, our seconds, our days, and our years as we stare in the mirror and see gray hair, and we all get older each year. But really, what is time? It's all astronomy, the rotation of the earth. And if you're a flat earther, it's still the cycles of the solar cycles. And the bottom line, and the lunations, of course, the new moons is a month. And all the planetary astronomy is our perception of reality while we're on this particular planet in this life. And the Nadi astrology is so profound because it looks at where do we come from and where are we and where are we likely going. And this has always received a lot of criticism from the religions, and rightly so, because we do have free will. And a lot of people who study Vedic astrology say, oh no, it's all fated. I don't believe that. And that's where the rabbinical texts really shined a lot of light on that. And we've mentioned the Book of Abramelin. We've mentioned the Sha'arei HaGilgam. And of course, a lot of the religions have also touched on that too. That's what they call enlightenment, or the mysteries of, the saints and the prophets and all that. And they're right. And it seems like when we hit a certain state of conscious growth, we start stepping out of the pressures of the illusion of time. And it's interesting you mentioned the cedar chip that you have on. And we had mentioned the ringing cedars of Russia, which the ringing cedars comes from these trees that last up to I think 510 years or 550 years. And then they actually start ringing for 3 years. And they're actually telling humanity, cut us down and, take the energy from them. And if they're not cut down within 3 years, they start introverting and implode. They just literally start to die off, all this celestial energy that has been imbued through the needles of the pines for 500 something years. That is this magical energy. It's really interesting. And Anastasia talks about how she actually astro travels to different worlds with totally different realities. And one place she talks about is where literally you would think, they're so advanced, you would think about something you want to make, and this machine makes it for you. So, we're now entering a new era of high-tech expansion and growth. And this really places an emphasis on who are we? We are really truly still spiritual beings having a physical experience, no matter how complex the external world gets.
Right. Absolutely. We always will be, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do or say to change that, no matter, what you think, or it is what it is. And it'll always be that way.
That's exactly right.
It's almost like when you were talking about, the lower conscious mind, or the nefesh, is a perception of reality. When you realize that, that's kind of like when freedom starts to come, right?
That's right. Because there's so much suffering on this planet. You see this. You see the alcoholism, the drugs, you see the fighting, the war, but you also see a lot of individuals. These never get much press, but there's a lot of people. No one can see into the soul like the angelic forces and the divinity can. And that's a really interesting element there. And we're seeing now the lower demonic forces make moves to really create chaos and get more control of the physical world. It'll never work, not completely. It can't, because everything comes from the upper divine. It's sustained by it. The evil spirits themselves are sustained and forced to do it. So it's really an interesting little planet here. I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This is where it's really going on. And it truly is a matrix, but I think much more than just some digital matrix that's all around us. This is really divine. You look at how trees grow. Of course, Fibonacci, it's been declared the Fibonacci patterns that are in branches and trees and in life itself. It's right in everything. It's how it uniquely grows in these mathematical patterns and gemstones, all of this. It's so amazing when you look at it. And that's why divinity cannot be replicated. And no matter how much the dark forces try and come in, life just keeps going on. The sustained life force keeps going on. And this is why it seems like there's a matrix here of reincarnation until we get to the point to where we rise up and we escape from Alcatraz, and then we start moving on to other dimensions. And the Nadi astrology really shows that. The Trim Samsa, I'm actually quite surprised at using that with the Nadi astrology. You can actually see a lot of comparisons to why was the mom this way, or the dad, or so on and so forth. It's pretty interesting stuff.
And does the Trim Samsa allow us to look at our past lives?
It certainly, well, the Trim Samsa is really good at, you can go back several past lifetimes. What's interesting is you have to use both the Nadi astrology and the Trim Samsa too, and the Navamsha. These are all divisional charts. you get a pretty good idea of why mom, dad, or the brothers or sisters, or why you don't have any, are in the positions that they are. And, again, nothing is 100% lucid, but it's kind of interesting because it changes our perspective on some of the animosity or maybe our openness to why we have such good things happening too. Because, I see, like in my chart, I can actually see the sun is the father, the brothers are Mercury and Mars, and right down the line, and you can see the tension that was there and why everything is the way that it is. And it's very interesting to see that dynamic go on. And the challenge.
Well, a great question is, why do we have the experiences that we have when we come in here? And what experiences might we have had previously that lead us into the current experience,
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, and we've looked at the astrology to try to see, what previous experiences we might have had. And it's really interesting. I mean, you can touch on some things there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it really is. And, nothing is 100% definitive, but you get a really good idea of at least the relationships that are happening and how it all fits together. And I think it changes our reaction because a lot of people feel victimized, or they feel like, geez, why would this happen to me? Again, I remember growing up, we had foster kids. And there was one girl that we had. She was so sweet, and it didn't work out. She didn't end up staying. And I would see her later in coffee shops and restaurants, and you could just see the pain and the hurt in her face. And she was bounced around a lot. And you wonder, why do certain lives have these experiences and other people seem like they just get away with stuff forever? They treat people like crap. They get fortunes, and they're despotic. They're like Scrooge,
Yeah.
And then you just scratch your head and go, why would that be? And many of us see this on our own families, or we see this with bosses. And it's really an interesting amalgam. Shakespeare might have been right. This is the stage, and we're all the actors. And for some reason, the Nadi astrology certainly seems to be the script that we're all playing. And to your comment before, it really seems that the Shari Hagilgam sheds a lot of light on this subject insofar as that we seem to be fragmented pieces of souls that come in here. And we literally purify and rectify until that's joined back at some point in what we would call time. I don't believe there is time. And then that moves on to other worlds. So it's really deep stuff. It's way beyond, I think, what any of the religions have really shed a light on. And some of the ancient documents speak to that. And there's a lot of disinformation too. I think there's a lot of disinformation from spirits themselves. They don't want us getting conscious. They actually feed off the soul force energy down here.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, some of the greatest spiritual teachers have said, don't look outside yourself for anything. Look inside, and you will come to it if you really look inside. So
yeah, most outside forces are usually very disappointing when you look at it. They really are. I mean, we see the lawsuits, we see the vengeance, we see all the stuff that goes on. The government will save us, this and that, whatever analogy you want to use. It's usually quite disappointing and usually incarcerates you even more.
Even more. Even more. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you said, this is a vast subject, but we wanted to touch on it a little bit. And, we'd love to hear what you all have to say about it and what you think about it. So please leave your comments below. Anything you'd like to add, Jeff, to close?
No, I think, that's such a vast topic. It's a lot of fun, but, it's we're all looking for answers and insights any way we can get it. Some people pursue psychology, some people pursue, astrology, some people pursue spiritual methods, whatever works. We're all looking for truth. And I think any way you can find it that works for you is helpful. And, Nadi astrology is an interesting viewpoint. It really, really is.
Yeah, we're all looking for truth. Thank God, right? Thank God a lot of us are looking for truth.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a beautiful week. Happy new moon coming up, and we'll see you soon.